You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where they like to do cool things with financial technology. Today we've got an interview with Patrick Lord of Rabbit Finance, who's going to be telling us about zombie business fraud. How's that for a hook? A little bit more on that in just a second. Want to remind you first, you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out our website, big-fintech.com. And in terms of a couple other things we got going on, if you haven't already, please mark your calendar for Wednesday afternoon, August 19th. That is, again, a Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. And that is for our roughly monthly CU Town Hall, coming back after a break for the summer months. Always lively, always interactive. We hope you come and bring your thinking caps because it's supposed to be an open dialogue. I don't know exactly what the topic's going to be this time, but I got a pretty strong suspicion that the AI models that have kind of gone rogue from a couple of different providers over the course of the last few weeks is probably going to play some role in the conversation. That's our Grand Poobah's John Best's prerogative, along with the people in the audience. So if you get any other topics you think are interested, let us know in advance or just bring them up right there on the spot. No cost to attend. You do need to register in advance, though. cutownhall.com is the place you can go to request that free invitation. And while you're there, if you'd like to, there's copies, links to videos and audio of the recent episodes that we've done, so you get some idea of what you're getting yourself into. Innovation Club, the other thing I want to mention, we've talked about this before. You've probably heard us discussing. We talk mostly about the in-person events that take place twice a year. This is a small curated group of leaders in the credit union field. You do have to be a credit union member, or not member, an employee, I should say. This is not a vendor solution thing. This is actual credit unions. And get together. It's a great way to stretch your R&D budget and work collaboratively, which is what this industry does so well around the table. We have monthly meetings on a virtual basis. We do have them twice a year in person. That'll be coming up again in Florida in September, I believe, maybe October. Not sure if we've set the date yet. But we do have guest passes if you'd like to give it a try and see if it works for you. We've got folks from the IT departments. We got CIOs, CTOs, data scientists, folks involved in strategy, all of the above. A good cross-functional conversation, brainstorming, and actual tactical building out of solutions. It does shade toward the tech side, but I'm not a tech guy, and I still find it pretty interesting too. If you're interested in more about that, check out the Innovation Club tab at the Best Innovation Group website, big-fintech.com once again, or just drop me a note and we'll steer you in the right place. One current event I'd like to cover this week. We talked recently about Stripe and Advent International, a private equity firm making a $53 billion bid for PayPal. Well, interesting. Stripe's obviously been very busy these days because they are now rumored, and this has been reported by multiple sources, including the Wall Street Journal, they're rumored to be in discussions to buy an AI company called OpenRouter for $10 billion, which I think qualifies as aggressive given that the June valuation based on the latest funding round for OpenRouter valued them at $1.3 billion. So if anybody thinks that the hype and hysteria around AI is slowing down, that's a pretty good piece of evidence that that's probably not the case. I do see what they see strategically in this, however. OpenRouter is involved. It's a gateway and routing company within AI. So as more traffic for information, payments, etc., goes through AI-oriented rails and directions, it's pretty important to be in the middle of that process and help to diagnose and influence that process. So I can see why Stripe would want to get involved. What I haven't heard at this point is what that means for the PayPal bid. Throwing $10 billion around here, and their share would have been probably a good $25 billion at least on the other bid for PayPal. There's been a lot of silence on the PayPal side since PayPal's board actually rejected the offer as insufficient. PayPal has since put out their quarterly earnings, and they actually did quite well. They actually exceeded the expectations on EPS and revenue, and they raised their full year guidance. The one thing that I noticed, though, is that after rejecting that offer, PayPal has held on to the bump that their stock got once that initial offer was made, which was a pretty significant premium. I think it was like 23% premium to their then market stock price. It didn't go all the way up to the offer, but about halfway. And even if that offer is no longer considered to be as likely, it seems to have held up some of that value, although it's still well off of its highs. So I got a feeling the PayPal story is not over yet, but now we have another one with Stripe to look at as well. Okay, let's get back to our main attraction. What part of zombie business fraud doesn't grab your attention? I love that phrase. I saw Patrick Lord from Rapid Finance using that online in some of the conversations, kind of floating that idea. I thought, okay, this sounds like something I want to follow up with. And it's kind of a perfect storm, speaking of AI, as we just were, because at the same time as you've got the ability, zombie business fraud, you got AI, which actually enables a lot of this stuff. It just is, makes it easier for fraudsters to execute on some of their strategies. And quite honestly, some of the things you'll hear us talking about is the aftermath of COVID and some of the additional data that's actually kind of left lying at the roadside that was put out there for a variety of reasons. Kind of a tricky situation. Let's just jump into it and have a listen to the conversation that I had with Patrick. I'm here with Patrick Lord from Rapid Finance. Patrick, you've been in the risk and underwriting space, well, I guess with Rapid Finance for about a decade, but before that as well, I understand. Thanks for taking the time to talk today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Glenn. And yeah, that's right. I've been with Rapid Finance a little over a decade. Most of my career here has been focused exclusively, kind of in underwriting risk and the areas that bridge up to it. And before that, with another fintech and a credit card processing company doing the same.
So kind of in that space for a while.
Yeah.
I've noticed recently you've been ringing the alarm bells around a new, and it kind of ties to the conversation around AI, a new threat called zombie, that you're calling at least, I'm not sure how well this phrase is known, zombie business fraud. And I guess the fact that AI is making it a lot easier for small businesses that have kind of gone dormant to wind up, falling prey and becoming kind of fertile ground for this. Can you say more about exactly how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. And zombie business fraud, right? Interesting term. It's one of those things to make sure you grab some attention around it. But really, what I'm talking about is this concept. The business identity of an application's coming through. It makes it look like the business is alive from the outside, but the operating reality doesn't necessarily really support the application, right? So there might be a dormant LLC or some sort of inactive business with stale records or some sort of other legitimate business identity that a fraudster's kind of taken advantage of and leveraged and using other information to kind of apply. So kind of in a sense, putting that good old zombie costume on, something's there, but hey, it's really not that business that's coming, across your underwriter's desk, so to speak.
And that's, I guess the AI comes in because it makes it easier to scour for the needles in the haystack of, the companies that meet this criteria, and then also the additional data you need to build out your case.
Yeah, so there is so many interesting ways that fraudsters are leveraging AI to kind of help support the case on things, everything from, fabricating a website, like takes minutes to spin up a website that looks, really good, creating fake bank statements, creating fake invoices, whatever to kind of support activity that's coming through. Really kind of just tips the scale for them in terms of creating, potentially authentic looking documentation and web activity if you don't know what to look for and safeguard against.
Yeah, I think you mentioned also that this activity is not tracked really well. It tends to get just lumped in more broadly with synthetic business fraud, which I assume is more like creating a consumer synthetic identity. That's creating literally a fictional business. Is that kind of the difference between the two?
Yeah. So when I think about when I'm talking about zombie business fraud, it really there's kind of two abutting categories that kind of go with it that hey, not all of these end up being mutually exclusive. So when you bring up synthetic business fraud, right, I'm thinking about that business identity or sometime even the consumer associated with it being fabricated from stolen or thin data, right? The other area that kind of bridges right next to it would be business takeover fraud, where there's a real business identity and it's an unauthorized applicant coming through trying to apply on behalf of the business.
With the
But
business in its actual form, just misrepresenting
yeah,
themselves as having the responsibility or the authority
yeah,
to work on it.
yeah, yeah. But when I'm really thinking about the zombie business fraud, you're talking about that dormant, inactive, or thinly operating business made to look active, or somebody who sees there's a business out there who's not really safeguarding themselves and maybe kind of creating a faux offshoot and leveraging what's going on with them.
Do you have any sense? I don't know if it probably isn't really hard data, but even anecdotally, how frequent this happens, how big a problem, and if is it growing quickly?
Yeah, so I don't really think that there's a clean industry-wide statistic for this, right? I don't think a lot of folks have necessarily heard the term zombie business fraud, and it does tend to get tracked under broader categories like the synthetic fraud or application fraud, document fraud, business identity misuse or takeover. And so that makes it really hard to know, like, hey, how big of a problem this is. I certainly know anecdotally most interesting cases that underwriters will kind of talk with me about. The interesting ones, they take up a lot of time when they come across our desk. But I can throw out a couple of proxies out there, right? There's one study at the end of last year came out looking at potential stale business records. And they cited that entities that are 10 plus years old, there are about 140,000 of them that appeared to be kind of stale or inactive, records that could be primed for something like this. Some other data sources, the GAO analyzed PPP and COVID-19 idle data, and of 13.4 million unique recipients, a little over 6 million of them claimed 2 or more employees. A little more than a third of those that claimed 2 or more employees didn't have any matching national directory of new hire wages data.
Bingo. So
That.
that's, I
Right.
mean, that's
Yeah.
talk about a perfect training ground for this stuff. You had this,
Yeah.
opportunity where the goal was to actually approve quickly, and probably right about the time that AI was really kind of getting its legs too.
Yeah, yeah, and that's not to say like, hey, all of that was fraud, right? Small business lending is messy, and that was time frame where there was a lot of quick moving parts, a lot of uncertainty in the world. And so I certainly also don't think that's necessarily representative of what the population is. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, hey, that's the best information that's kind of out there that I can find.
Well, given that, and given that you've been doing this for a decade, how do you think, what enhancements to the current underwriting process need to be put in place to kind of, head this off at the pass? And, the idea that AI is kind of floating out there as a new enabler for the fraudsters, how has it changed the way you approach things?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, you have to stay on top of your game and make sure your process is well defined, right? I think, gosh, when I started underwriting about 13 years ago, it seemed like a lot of it at that point almost felt like checkbox underwriting. Now it feels a lot more like, hey, you needed to connect the dots and really doing a full-fledged verification of the story behind the business and looking across independent sources. So it kind of goes beyond verifying just, hey, does this exist, to validating all the elements of, hey, is this business actually operating? Is it operating in the way they say it is?
Yeah, we're a little bit past the days of you're on a D&B and they send you a photo and there's apparently a storefront someplace, and gee, I guess it must be a real business. It's getting a bit more forensic, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely right. You can't just trust, oh, hey, there's information out there in the Secretary of State. You need to dig in a little bit more and have checks in there. You have to do checks on all the small elements of the application, the IP addresses, looking into whether the address makes sense. And do they actually have authority on the business? Right. If you're accepting PDF uploads of the documents, making sure that you're having some sort of analysis that goes on of that document and the information that's in, looking at the metadata, looking behind the scenes, trying to see, is this legitimate and is it presenting the story that should be there for the business type and the business that's applying with you.
Thinking about it kind of from the other side, the folks who are creating these AI engines, do you think, is there something that they can or should be doing in terms of the way they build their models that might, put the safeguards in place and kind of, take care of it before the underwriters have
Yeah.
to?
Yeah. That's an interesting one. Right. And so I would certainly say yes, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it. Right. I'm just kind
Yeah.
of, being realistic.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's paramount that any financial institution or underwriting group, they're staying on top of like, hey, how could the fraudster strip them up, and working with vendors that do that. Now, that said, I think some of these AI companies, could make sure that they do the right things.
In a
Right.
perfect world, which we're not
Yeah.
living in, obviously,
Yeah.
what kind of things would those be?
Yeah. So restricting generation of high risk financial documentation like tax
Mhm.
returns, bank statements, payroll records, IDs, tax forms, things like that. I certainly think they could make sure that they support provenance and watermarking of the documents that are created within their tools, have measures to look at monitoring abuse and apply rate controls on accounts,
Gee,
making
those
sure
those
there's
all sound really
yeah,
rational and common
yeah,
sense, and I guess for
yeah.
that reason, we should assume they're probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, so even if they did that, or probably five or six other ideas I could rattle off here, even if they did that all, like if I snapped my fingers and they did that now, right, there's still going to be a way around it,
They're
right?
always going to find the soft underbelly. Yeah.
Yeah. Open source models, model hopping, um, yeah, those safeguards matter, right? But realistically,
I'll just keep
financial
throwing the
institutions need to be
cliches out
there.
here. The toothpaste is out of
Yeah,
the tube. Yeah, you're not going to be able
yeah,
to stop it.
yeah.
Well, why don't we take a step back just for a second? Tell me a bit more about Rapid Finance. Where do you fit into kind of the overall lending equation, and who your customers are? Where what market do you serve? Let's put it that way. I'm sure some of our listeners know, but I'm not sure they all do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rapid Finance, an interesting company. Like we kind of sit at the intersection of small business lending, embedded financing, and what I would call lender enablement. Right. So our traditional business for the past 2+ decades has been direct lending to small and medium businesses in the U.S.
So
We've
you were the
delivered,
lender of record.
yeah,
Got it.
yep. And so we've provided more than $5 billion in growth capital to businesses across the country in our time there.
And what
Uh,
when small business is roughly defined in what range?
yeah. So I mean, anywhere probably below what would be considered publicly traded.
Okay,
Right.
a pretty
Right. So
wide range.
you're probably talking most of the businesses we're looking at probably doing less than 25 million a year in revenue, and you'd probably hit the long tail at that point
Got it.
there. Certainly, I would say a vast majority much smaller than that.
Okay.
Um, right. But we also support over time have realized, hey, we've created a lot of great tools for ourselves and helping, fight the good fight and become more efficient and fight fraud. Right. So we've realized, all right, hey, we can help other people do that. All right. So we support other lenders through some of our enterprise solutions, origination system. We have our own system, Links, that kind of takes a 360 view across all the various attributes of an application comes in, and generates real-time insights as we're evaluating an application coming in, even before it hits underwriting. Right. And then we also embedded financing and a funding network solution that we're able to help out with.
Got it. And given that you've got, I mean, having fraud out there in the marketplace doesn't help anybody. So, the fact that you've got some tools you can fight against it, you're making that available potentially to anybody who's doing lending at this point. It would be potentially
Right.
a market for you.
But yeah, but potentially, and specifically, small and medium business lending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good stuff. If anybody wants to find out more, the Rapid Finance website, is there a particular kind of page on there that maybe people might, depending, I'm guessing if you're a small business as opposed to a potential partner, there might be different places to go.
Yeah. So if you're a small business interested in financing, or if you're a broker who's interested in our core finance business, it's just rapidfinance.com. Right. If you're a financial institution looking to partner technologically, right, it would be enterprise.rapidfinance.com. So our rapid enterprise website is up for that. And I would also encourage people to follow our LinkedIn page to kind of keep up with the news, or even myself, right? My LinkedIn as well. I'm always interested in talking about fraud with people there. So if you just want to talk about fraud, I'm open.
That's the great thing about the fraud community, the good guy
Yeah.
fraud community. Everybody's more than happy to trade notes. So
Yeah.
I'll post all those links in our show notes. Patrick Lord, Rapid Finance. Really appreciate you taking the time. Very interesting stuff.
All right. Thank you, Glenn.
Small business lending is messy. I've heard that before. It's nice to hear it laid out so succinctly by Patrick. B2B is where the money is. It's the holy grail. There's been people going after the space forever. SMB probably even a little bit more trickier than B2B overall. And there's been lots of great solutions out there. But if anybody's truly cracked the code, I'm not aware of it. So I think that, again, as we go after these things, one of the reasons it gets so tricky is for the lack of clarity of information, the lack of totally verifiable data and things like that, the conversation that we were having. I'm always still amazed by all the niche needs and opportunities that are out there in both the small business and even the mid-sized business space. I've seen so many different solutions where I'm like, why doesn't one size fit all? I mean, little things like, breweries, funeral homes, places that have, very oddly specific needs. You think, okay, you could shoehorn something in. There's still enough value add that people see different reasons to be approaching it separately. And I find that kind of stuff fascinating. On the small business side, another piece of information I thought was really interesting is a new report that came out from Valera and about SMBs and their approach to banking and their attitudes toward banking providers. We're going to try to have a conversation with them, but the calendars just didn't work out. I'm going to link to that report. You'll find that in the show notes, but just a quick kind of overview of what I find there. According to what they say, 86% of small and medium-sized businesses use they engage with multiple partners, which I thought was maybe an interesting way of putting it. We want to make sure we say banking partners. Supposedly 2.8 different banking relationships on average. 58%, more than half of them, according to this, use a P2P solution, whether for paying or accepting payments, which I initially thought it was kind of surprising, but the more I thought about it, a lot of small businesses kind of merge, especially on the micro side, with individual, kind of consumers. So if they're used to using P2P that way, there's no reason they wouldn't do that as well on the business side. Also, reporting relatively decent satisfaction and also relatively low intent to switch their providers, which might say, okay, then why are we talking about this? What's the opportunity? I think there is an opportunity. For one thing, you can see it that as businesses migrate from the micro and small range to the lower middle market, which, presumably with success, that's what a lot of them are going to do. The share that are actually banking with the big national names jumps dramatically from roughly 55% for the small guys. And that sounded odd to me at first, but then I realized that's probably about the market share for the national banks among consumers too. But then as businesses grow into the lower middle market, it goes all the way up, according to this study, to 74%, almost 3 out of 4. They didn't actually set a definition, but based on the numbers, it looks like 50 FTE is roughly the break point of where they start seeing that behavior shift between small micro to the lower middle market. And at the same time, as you move to that area, you find folks moving away from just operating their micro business through their personal accounts into actual business accounts. Again, that percentage drops from about 42% using personal accounts in the micro level, all the way down to about 1 in 5, 22%, once you get to the mid-market standpoint. At the end of the day, what I see though is, small institutions are potentially losing revenue opportunity just as these organizations are growing and maturing to the point that they have greater needs and they have a greater opportunity to generate a revenue stream for their providers. And I suspect there's blind spots here that they probably have a lack of awareness of some of the capabilities of their legacy institutions, the smaller institutions that they could probably meet if they were pitched with the appropriate offer at the appropriate time. Doesn't that sound interesting? We've seen several solutions along those lines that look to do that. Seems like more robust reporting and financial control are two of the real, top of the wish list, what people are looking for there. The Valera report, and as I said again, we'll post the link to that, is focused on the payment side of the equation. I've got to say, we haven't talked about this. Some of the piece that actually forces that migration to the larger institutions, I suspect, is the desire to have access to credit. And whether it's, by going to bigger national banks to do it, and, there's a lot of community banks and things like that, and obviously credit unions getting more involved in small business lending too. But you've got the folks from the non-bank segment that's growing dramatically and poaching a bigger piece of that pie. You see offers all the time, whether it's TV, online advertising, or whatever. Rapid Finance, frankly, one of them. They're actually providing the financing directly, but they're also looking to provide the services to actually do this properly to the other lenders as well, including financial institutions. Playing both sides of the table on that one, more power to them. More lending taking place for the small businesses. I'm all for it. With that, another episode of the Big Cast in the books. So Glenn, my name is Glenn Sarvati. My firm is 154 Advisors. Probably the best way to track me down is via my LinkedIn connections. Or you can always find me here at the Best Innovation Group, big-fintech.com. You can find them on LinkedIn as well under Big Fintech. Our grand poobah, John Best, is JB Fintech, and you'll find him out there as well. If you're listening to this podcast on any of your usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc., you should find the show notes there, as you will if you're listening on the website, big-fintech.com. Give us a like wherever you're doing that so you find out when we've got new material, which is usually on Tuesdays. And we try to provide as many links as we can to the things that we're talking about in those show notes. To be sure to check those out too. You'll get a link to that Valera report. You'll find how to get in touch with the folks, both whether you're a financial institution or a small business. The different routing that they've got at the website for Rapid Finance. We got both of those posted, as well as some other interesting stuff, including that some background from Wellesley Financial. I thought they did a good write-up of the rumored acquisition that Stripe is pursuing with Open Router. We'll be back again with more information. We're coming up on the conference season again. Last week we talked about FinTech South. If you happen to be in the Atlanta area, we'd love to see you there. Truist Park, home of the Atlanta Braves, on Tuesday, August 18th. I've got some discount codes. If you're interested, drop me a line and I can help you out with that. Would love to see you there. And then not too long after that, just after Labor Day, we're back to Finovate, one of our favorites. And it looks like they got plenty going on this year too. Just had my conversation with Greg Palmer just yesterday. And that'll be next week's content and an interview that we'll be posting here on the Big Cast. So be sure to check back in for that. And until then, thanks as always for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big Fintech. Email info@big-fintech.com. Or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.